In part two, we're going to look at these two cities first, which are Cana and Mount Carmel. Cana is where Jesus performed his first miracle, which we read about in the book of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Let's read it together. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there was set there 6 waters of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now, and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. And he said to him, "Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You've kept the good wine until now." This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The book of John, chapter 21, verse 2, tells us that the apostle Nathanael was from Cana. Now we're going to look at Mount Carmel. There are several events that took place on or around Mount Carmel, but we're going to look at these two. We see in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 25, verse 2 and 3, where a man by the name of Nabal lived in Mount Carmel with his wife Abigail. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful in appearance. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. David had come across Nabal's men who were tending to Nabal's sheep and goats, and he didn't fight with them or try and take any of Nabal's sheep or goats, even though he and his 600 men were hungry. David sent some of his men to Nabal to tell him how he had not harmed any of his men or taken any of the sheep or goats, but that he and his men were very hungry and was hoping he would share just a few of those sheep and goats along with some bread to eat. Nabal chastises David's men and tells them that he has no respect for David and that they can go back to where they came from. When David's men came and told him what Nabal said, David told his men to gird their swords and mount up. They're going to go to where Nabal lived and kill him along with all the men that worked for him. One of Nabal's men came and told Abigail, Nabal's wife, about what David was getting ready to do. So Abigail tells him to get 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 sheaths of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and load them on the donkeys. Then she sets out to take them to David. Abigail meets David as he and his men are coming to kill Nabal and the men who work for him, and she gives David what she's prepared for him. David quickly understands that God has intervened by sending Abigail to him with this food so that he would not try and take vengeance into his own hands. David accepts the food and turns back from going there to kill Nabal and his men. Abigail goes back to Mount Carmel, and Nabal is having a party, and he's very drunk, so she does not try to talk with him at that moment. In the morning, though, she tells Nabal about how David was on his way to kill him, but that she had taken food out to him, and so he decided not to kill him after all. Nabal's heart sunk within him, knowing that he would have been killed last night if it wasn't for Abigail taking David and his men that food. God himself kills Nabal 10 days later, and David takes Abigail in to be his wife. The second event is a miracle that Elijah performed in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 18. Let's read it together. Now Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one bull for yourselves and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it." So they took the bull which was given them, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal, from the morning even till noon, saying, "O Baal, hear us." But there was no voice, no one answered. Then they leaped about the altar which they had made. And so it was at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, "Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is meditating, or he is busy, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's sleeping and must be awakened." So they cried out aloud and cut themselves, as was their custom, with knives and lances, until the blood gushed out of them. And when midday was past, they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." So all the people came near to him, and he prepared the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Israel shall be your name." Then with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 sheaves of seed. And he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood, and said, "Fill 4 water pots with water, and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Then he said, "Do it a second time," and they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time," and they did it a third time. So the water ran all around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. And it came to pass at the time of offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, "Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Lord God, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. Now when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Just click on the video that says "A Brief Study of the Geography of Israel, Part 3" to continue.